Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal.
And if you are headed to the Padre Island National Seashore, bring your beach towels, but leave the drones at home. Drones are banned from all national parks and seashores because they can be used to disturb visitors. They're noisy and can impact wildlife. Park rangers issuing that reminder on the park's social media page over the weekend. The ban had been issued in 2014, and at least one time a drone was used to harass wildlife.
All right, everyone. So today we're going to explore the world of drones and what's going on with this market, discuss the experience of owning one, registering it with the government, and why there are so many rules and regulations now around them. Good morning, Dee. How are you?
I'm doing good. I think this will be interesting. I think drones were something that was hyped up for quite a while, and then it's kind of like went quiet a little bit. You don't hear very much about drones anymore, but they're very much out there, and they're still an industry. And it'll be interesting to hear. I don't know a ton of what has happened since kind of the hype hit the peak.
Yeah.
It'll be kind of interesting to hear about where things are now.
Yeah, so let me explain. So I did some research, digging around and kind of looking at drones because for some reason I don't see them that much either anymore at all. I mean, I used to see them at the parks. I'd see them, at the beach all over the place, and now it's like I don't see them. People just aren't flying them, and maybe they are, but I just don't know where they're at. And also, a lot of places that I like to go hiking and explore, there's big, huge signs with an X over a drone, meaning no drones here. So I thought maybe the industry had collapsed and they're barely being sold, but it looks like it's kind of the opposite. So, according to Insider Intelligence, total drone industry shipments are expected to experience a compound annual rate of 66.8% in 2023, and which is a global shipment reaching about 2.4 million, with expected by 2025 to reach about 63.6 billion in sales. So, they are projecting a growth in this market. According to Drone Industry Insights, the global drone market is expected to grow from 23 billion in 2021 to about 41.3 billion by 2026. About 855,000 of the registered drones, that's the key word, registered, in the US are for recreational purposes, and the rest are being used for commercial use, such as real estate, agriculture, law enforcement, that kind of stuff. The number of consumer drone shipments worldwide is projected to go from about 5 million back in 2020 when the lockdown began to about 9.6 million by 2030. So these are all the different numbers that I pulled together here. It's kind of showing a big growth in this space. What's interesting is the demand is driven by a lot of commercial applications. So you're seeing them a lot now in construction. You're seeing them a lot in agriculture, checking out crops and stuff. Military and defense are huge, of course. Law enforcement, I have a story about that one. Logistics, media and entertainment. It's kind of being used all over as a way of kind of pulling the human out of the experience for safety purposes, but also trying to get a much, much bigger picture of what something looks like and using vision technology in order to gather data about it. So there's a lot of big opportunities here. It's just within recreation, I haven't heard much lately. So I was looking in the recreation market, and one of the things that I found was that pretty much DJI leads the market. So they are about 76% of the market share. It's a Chinese company. They make fantastic drones. You've probably seen them before because all of the different, surfers who have filmers and mountain bikers and all these people that have filmers, the filmers are using DJI drones. They're easy to use. They're robust. They have tons of safety features on them. They're just made really well. Um, it's also known for its consumer drones, but it also manufactured drones for farming, infrastructure, and public safety as well. Now, digging a little bit deeper and looking at kind of what's going on, they're the number one. And then right down below them, is Intel with only like 4.1% of the market. UNEC is about 3.6. 3D Robotics, which was really big here in the US about 10 years ago, is down to about 2.6%. Parrot, which we've all seen maybe at like Costco and stuff, 2.5%. And Ehung, which is about 0.6%. So clearly DJI owns this market. Let's talk a little bit about when it started and got moving along. So, non-military drone development started around 2006. If you've been around if you're around during that time, deep in tech, you would have heard that this was kind of like a big thing. MIT was developing different software applications to help move drones around and basically keep them stable in the sky and that kind of stuff. But it really took off for recreational use around 2015. And then by 2016, the FAA jumped in and really started regulating it and framing up rules about what you can and cannot do with drones for safety purposes. So Dee, what are your thoughts about all this? I mean, the market is growing. It's just from a recreational standpoint, we're just not seeing them in the wild, so to speak, that often.
Yeah, I don't think that there are a ton of recreational uses for them, especially with the way that the regulation has kind of complicated everything. I
Mhm.
didn't even know you were supposed to be registering your drone, right?
Yes.
I didn't. I had no idea, and I think that's one of the things. It's the disparity between like, all right, there's let me see, it was like 800,000 registered drones for recreational purposes, and that's 60%, 63% of registered of drones
Mhm.
are. So that means that there's 1.5 million, roughly 1.5 million registered drones. But then I'm seeing there's 5 million shipped every year. So that's the vast majority of drones out in the market are not registered. So there's a lot of people who don't even know that this is the case.
So
Uh,
I don't think that they do. So I didn't know that I needed to register mine, for example, until
mhm,
I was taking it out, flying around, and somebody actually mentioned it to me. And they said, like, oh
mm,
yeah, did you register your drone? And I was like, register it? And they're like, yeah, because of its size. So if you buy like a little tiny small one or
okay.
whatever, you don't really have to register it. But if you buy something substantial that actually can go really high in the sky and fly around and do all this cool stuff, then you are supposed to register. So I went through the process of registering it. I had registered it a while back, but I went back in and I looked at the paperwork and how it was all done. And it's really interesting because you're basically just claiming like, here's my number of my aircraft. Here's where I plan to use it. I do understand the rules around it. Like I can't fly it into airports and places like that, which all the newer drones, you can't even get there. Like there's an
Yeah.
actual like barrier around it. So as you fly it in, it won't go any further. Mine
Mhm,
can fly into it because of the fact that it's an older drone. So it didn't have that software in it. And now
mhm.
all the new drones have that software in it. Well, what's interesting is that like as you read all those regulations, you realize there's a lot of fines and different things associated with it. But it's mostly this idea that they want to know who you are. So if you lose that drone, and it has its
Yeah.
sticker underneath it, then they'll know exactly who it belongs to.
Well, it does make sense. There was a story recently that somebody flew a drone into one of the championship games, the football championship
Yes.
games last
Yeah,
week.
yeah, I heard about that.
And that person, I'm sure they identified who it was through the registration and things, and they were able to find out who that person was. But that person's facing jail time,
Yeah.
and it makes sense that they are because they're infringing. They're creating an unsafe situation where if this thing collides with something else and something falls out of the sky onto someone, then like that's something you can't have.
Yeah, it's super dangerous. I mean, if you look at how much they weigh with their batteries, and a lot of them had gimbals with cameras and
Hmm.
stuff like that, you get hit in the head with that. I mean, it can cause some
Yeah.
serious damage.
Or even aside from that, if it's in like a stadium like that and it hits a light or one of the cameras that are on those lines that fly across the sky cams or something, and that one of those cameras or one
Mhm.
of those lights falls on someone, that could kill someone easily.
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of this is driven by those experiences, a lot of the regulation that was put in, so people behaving badly. I don't know if you heard, but there were some stories of people, flying a drone over Old Faithful and like dropping it, inside.
Oh God, yeah.
People flying them over Yosemite and them falling in the falls and cracking open. It's like we don't have batteries and garbage basically in our beautiful
Hmm.
national parks. At the same time, though, to be fair, like I love seeing the footage that is done from drones in national parks and stuff. It's so beautiful and pretty, but like it's like you have to get a permit. They block off the area for you. It costs money, right? Like it's a whole process.
Hmm.
It's just like flying an airplane, but like tremendously safer.
Yeah. I think one of the things you look at when I look at this market, and I say there are tremendous applications that are not like a traditional consumer electronics device, right? So this is something that like the military is using or the police are using to patrol an area, to keep their eyes on something. For obviously for military, they're doing drone strikes, and there's issues with that. But for agriculture, if you want to use an AI enabled drone to patrol a fence line,
Hmm.
providing security and awareness, or maybe they're checking in on something. There are so many things that can be done with it, and obviously like the filming, being able to use a drone that's running off of a electric motor as opposed to getting a helicopter shot that makes for filming videos and things makes it much more accessible, much
Hmm.
cheaper, much more ecological. And you can imagine, like within Yosemite, for example, every search and rescue team should have
They
drones
do.
available
Yeah.
to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And Coast Guard, everyone else, there are tons and tons of applications, but for like just an end user who wants to own one, unless you're pretty serious about filming things,
Hmm.
it's doesn't seem like it provides a lot of value.
Well, so someone asked me the other day, they were like, "Oh, what do you use yours for?" Because they saw it; it's in a case. Excuse me. But so I take it out near the bay shore, where it's technically private land, and I like fly
Hmm.
it all around there, and it's kind of fun or whatever. Um, but almost every single place that I thought about taking it has a sign that says you can't take it there.
Yeah.
So I've kind of been like, I don't know. I've gotten to this point where I was like, well, I have one, so I'm going to keep it, but I'm not going to buy another one because I
When
can't
you,
do anything with it.
when you do think about taking it out to places, what's your objective? Like, what are you getting out of flying it
Oh,
there?
just the fun of flying it. I think they're super fun to. You can make them. Well, I do put the camera on. I put a GoPro on it, but like as I'm flying it, it's just like whipping it around corners, and like you could do really cool shots where it looks like you're chasing somebody and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
It's just really fun. It's just for pure play. Um, I have friends that fly them over the ocean to look for sharks and stuff like that. Just for fun, and they put the videos up on YouTube and stuff like that, which I think is great. But a lot of people that I know that use them, they use them to make money, right? It's a real thing, right? People hire you to
Yeah, they're using them to film, maybe.
film. Yeah, I mean, we had Justin Graham on, right? And he said that they use drones
Hmm.
all the
Hmm.
time. They did a big Jeep commercial, and they did Jurassic Park and all kinds of different movies and stuff like that. And a lot of little scenes here and there are like drone scenes, where
Yeah.
it's the only way to get that particular shot safely so people don't get hurt. I mean, I think back, there was, I like surfing, I like watching surfing. There was a big surf contest in Maui at Jaws, and Laird Hamilton was surfing, and I remember seeing the helicopter right above his head. I mean, this huge yellow helicopter filming him, and I thought to myself, man, one gust of wind and you can have an accident for sure. Now,
Sure.
there are no helicopters anymore. There's 10 or 15 drones. They all stay next to each other and away from each other. They film, and everybody grabs that footage and uses that for their own personal purposes. But it's, from a safety standpoint, it's fantastic. From a recreational fun standpoint, they're fun to fly, but it's getting to a point where you can't do it anywhere. So where do you go,
Yeah.
right?
And it also kind of feels like, okay, this was the equivalent to maybe flying a kite or a model airplane or something. It's not necessarily something that's mass market that every single person's going to do. It seems like at a level it's for the hobbyist market. Um, but if you're talking to kind of an investor crowd, they're not going to want to hear that. They're not really interested in like going after these small niche markets. They want to try to get to the mass
No,
market
where the key
that
where the
can make them
key
more.
really is the camera. So the drone
Hmm.
enables the camera, and the camera has vision technology, right? So it can actually,
Hmm.
scour an agricultural area and tell you which crops need to be watered or whatever it is, right? That's where the real value comes from. The drones are becoming,
Yeah.
well, actually, I should say this. In countries like Africa and other areas where they can't get medications and stuff to certain areas, they have these new types of airplanes. I think they're called drones, but basically they launch them. It's almost like pulling back on a big rubber band, and they shoot them in the sky, and then the drone
Hmm.
kind of kicks in. It delivers packages with little parachutes. It turns around, comes back. It's being used for really good purposes. Um, I think the recreational use time feels a bit over. I imagined it when drones came out. I would have predicted it that it would have been like the next uh, remote control car phase. Like in the 80s, there was a huge phase where everyone had to have a remote control car and they built it. And then you'd go to the park and you drive it and have so much fun. And I thought that's what this would turn into. But what I think we're finding is that
Yeah.
number one, it's more dangerous. Number two is
Mhm.
not everybody not everybody wants to fly only things in the sky. Number three is you now need permits, right? It's like it's becoming
Mhm.
harder and harder to become that thing.
Well, I think the RC car example is instructive because not everybody got into it. I
Yeah.
knew people who were very, very into it who had really high powered RC cars and they were racing them and all those things. But it was very much like a niche hobbyist thing. It was never like a huge mass market. Like you were never going to confuse their growth numbers for like AirPods or something.
No,
And
no.
it was also like it was kind of a moment in time. After a while, they kind of went away. It was like you said, it was a phase. uh, I don't really see that very much anymore with RC cars, and I think that's kind of the thing with drones. I think it was one of those things when you have a new technology come out, and we saw this a bit with crypto and things, was that people got a hold of it and they tried to make it this commercial, like mass market consumer product,
Mhm.
and it wasn't really appropriate, right? Like crypto blockchain in general is kind of a security product. And drones, I feel like, are more suited for some of these industrial or agricultural professional uses, enterprise uses, than they are for just mass market consumer use.
Mhm. Yeah, and you compared it the other day to 3D printers, and you said, we
Hmm.
all thought 3D printers were going to be the biggest thing, and could be on everybody's desk and that kind of stuff. Well, maybe you didn't, but you know,
Yeah, I'll take exception to that because I
yeah,
was predicting they would
yeah.
not be, and you were predicting they were.
Well, I saw the value of them, and I saw
Sure.
the quality at the time, and I thought, well, the way technology moves, give it 5 years, and we should have something great. But I learned through a friend who has one that it's a much more difficult process than people realize. Like you have to have
Hmm.
resin in your house, you have to have all these chemicals, you have to be able to dispose of those chemicals, you have to, use the power to run all night, you have to have fans to kind of cool your stuff. It's like there's all these little steps that are required. It's great for makers and people who are building stuff, but it really didn't become, oh, I put it next to my other printer in my house. And then I have a homework assignment and suddenly it prints out on there, right? Like it just didn't work out that way. And maybe one day it will, but like that's how drones feel. It's like they work, yes,
Yeah,
but they're very limited in their use for the average Joe.
and I think for printers, much like drones, the technology can get to the point where a lot of that stuff gets smoothed out, and people could use it in that way. But I don't know if there's a lot of need for it, right? Like a
Hmm.
lot of
Hmm.
what we saw for 3D printers was like, oh, you'll print replacement parts and things like that. But not a lot of people really go in and repair. That's definitely a subset of the population. Like,
Hmm.
and a lot of if you're Apple or Samsung or somebody, you don't really want somebody printing parts at home in order to replace them on your devices. You want them, they send out these sealed boxes that are very hard to open for a reason. They're the whole right to repair thing is has been a battle for a reason.
Yeah.
So I think with drones, you're kind of seeing something similar where there absolutely is kind of like the ham radio aspect of like there are enthusiasts who are going to be really into it, but it's pretty niche. And because they're niche, and because this is a hardware product that is expensive and hard to build, and you need a fair amount of software, that software needs maintaining, and that software needs to continue to advance, that it's a small market, like high cost to manufacture product that's going to require higher margins because you're selling to smaller numbers. So it's going to be very expensive, which then constrains you even further. So that's when it gets like, okay, well, now it's a security product that can patrol your factory,
Hmm.
or it can keep an eye on your vineyard to make sure that like things are going, or it can spot wildfires. Those kinds of high value uses
Hmm.
that are outside of the realm of like a normal consumer like us,
How
et
do
cetera.
how do you feel about having drones? that like monitor the perimeter of your home or inside your home, because they've gotten very light, they've gotten very cheap,
Hmm.
the small ones, and the batteries seem to last really long and they could dock themselves. I mean, do you see this as the next like Roomba, where like it adds security value to your home like a Roomba would? You don't have to think about it. It just kind of does its job.
I mean, if you have a normal size home, I don't think it seems unnecessary, and I don't know that you'd want something kind of buzzing around
Hmm.
like a fly, like keeping an eye on everything. I think when it comes to home security, most of us want a system that's relatively invisible to us as the residents. I
Uh,
mean, it just has enough visibility so that people know, like, oh, hey, it's being patrolled. I don't want to mess with that area. Now, if you're talking about a commercial facility, if
yeah.
you're talking about a factory, if you're talking about somewhere that houses IP or something like that, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense to
I
have
mean, you
these
worked in
drones around.
security before. Do you think that
Sure,
a drone can replace what you did?
100%, a
Oh,
1000%. I think
really?
they would much rather have a drone than a person there,
Why is that?
and I will tell you why. So ultimately, the entire training that I had, I did this when I was in undergrad. It's a pretty decent paying job for that, and you could do your homework while you were there a lot of times, especially like if you're working like graveyard and stuff, because there wasn't that much to do. Your main reason for being there was to bring down insurance premiums. So that's why you're trained to observe and report. There
Okay.
are some conditions in which you can search, but you're only searching for weapons. If you place somebody under arrest for whatever reason, you're not supposed to detain them. You're just supposed to tell them you're under arrest, and if you leave, then you're going to receive. We'll find you. I mean, the police will find you, and you're going to receive the additional charge uh, of resisting arrest. This is ultimately it's all under powers of citizens arrest at that
Okay.
point. But yeah, I mean, observe and report is a whole kind of meme for a reason because that's what they want you to do. They don't want you to expose them to liability. They're not as concerned about losing some material cost when because somebody is stealing I don't know boxes or whatever, as opposed to the liability of somebody getting injured because of a property crime.
Mm.
So when you remove that capability and now you have video for observing and reporting, and it has much greater visibility. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't get distracted. And you can have an AI system that says like, oh, hey, there's movement over here where it's not expected to be movement there. Fly to that area and observe it. That seems like a perfect application.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that because with drone technology being where it's at, it's like if it just cruises around the factory and it, you know, maybe it streams that image and or streams the video and records it 24/7, and it's like if
Mm-hmm.
someone was to do something, it could just say like, "Hey, stop right there" or whatever, and take their picture and that kind of stuff and just,
Mm-hmm.
call security or call the police or whatever it is. It's like
Yeah.
but are we getting to a point now where like people are feeling more comfortable with these drones flying around with cameras on them? Like I remember here's an interesting thing. I took the drone and I put the camera on it and I took it to my parents' park. And the park near their house is humongous, right? And I started flying this thing around. Now it is louder than the average drone because it's older. So it's like in the sky. The people walking around the park, just generally like having a stroll, looked very concerned that this thing was flying above their head and had a camera on
Mm-hmm.
it filming. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know that people really want that happening. Like, I don't know if you've had a drone in your neighborhood, but everyone kind of looks up at it with like fear or discomfort or something. Right. And so there is a part of it too that's a little bit of a stigma, right? Of like, why is this person flying a drone around with a camera on it, in my neighborhood, my park, or even in a place where you're going to work. Not to work, but to buy stuff, right? You're like, oh, I'm at the store and suddenly there's a drone flying around with a camera pointing at me. Is that weird?
Yeah. I don't. I don't know. Well, I mean, as far as like going into people's backyards, that's not really legal. That's technically trespassing. You're not
Yeah.
allowed to film on people's private property. Within a public park and whatnot, if the park allows, and that's up to the park, you're allowed to film as much as you want within the public environment. Like
Yeah.
so, if you were just holding a smartphone camera and recording someone, that's well within your rights.
Yeah.
There are I think the younger generation is getting much more accustomed to just filming occurring. Um, I think when it comes to drones or being present, is it all comes down to kind of implementation. Now, if you're talking about a commercial facility or like in agricultural, then it's just like it's part of the job, right? You're
Hmm.
gonna have things flying around, making sure that that if there's a fire, it's not going a certain place, or if somebody's stealing something, you can keep track of them and where they're going. Now, think about all of the injuries and things happen because of a criminal being chased in a car, and you have a high speed chase, and they're crashing into somebody else and things, and the police are trying to follow them. I'm thinking of like the old Blues Brothers movies where
Yeah.
like you have like 100 cars crashing into each other. Now that doesn't even need to happen anymore. You can send a drone to just follow them until they run out of gas or
Well,
something,
I have a
right?
I have a
And they
story
can,
about that. I have a real story about that.
yeah,
So I'm driving down, taking my son to school. I see some police around, and I'm like, oh, this is something's going on over here, So, anyways, so we keep going. I go to school. I drop him off. I'm on my way back home, and suddenly I see this woman standing on the side of the road, and she's got the full blown goggles and the whole thing on him. And there's a car
mm-hmm,
parked, and this guy's running, and there's a drone
mm-hmm,
going chasing after this guy down the street, and she's just literally just tracing this guy. Like they're not driving cars super fast in a neighborhood, nothing. They're just following on the drone, and then you can hear the police coming from a distance, like they're probably creating a perimeter or something. But she goes right into the backyards, right into wherever he's jumping and running or whatever. And apparently he got in a car
yeah,
accident, and I don't know why he freaked out and ran away. Um, but anyway, so she had the drone, and they tracked him down with it, and I was just like, here's the future, man. Like no more car chases or anything. This tiny little drone, which by the way looked incredibly durable. Like it looked like it was made out of like solid aluminum. Like it could take like it
mm-hmm.
would take a gunshot or something. Like so
Well,
clearly,
I mean, if unless you got a shotgun, it's going to be pretty hard to hit a drone flying in the
that's
air,
true.
right?
Yeah,
Like, especially if it's any kind of height. That's the reality is that we could, you think about stakeouts, you think
yeah,
about
yeah,
criminal pursuits. These are all things like if somebody's running from the cops, why wouldn't you just back off? Just follow them at a distance with a drone that they might not even see or know that it's following
yeah,
them. Wait for them to stop. I mean, eventually everybody needs to go to sleep, right? Just track them until that point and then arrest them.
yeah.
Like
No, it's
it's
true.
there's a ways to make this very easy. Same thing with a stakeout, right? You have AI enabled drones keeping an eye on a facility until something happens and it alerts you. So you get a like you know literally a message on your phone saying like, "Oh hey, crime's happening. Take a look."
Yep.
And you just log in like a ring camera and watch things going down. It's all being recorded. These are ways in order to make things safer in
Hmm.
general. And you imagine that there are situations uh, like some of these situations that happened in where the police have ended up killing someone
Hmm.
because they were in the wrong place or because they were exerting more force than maybe they needed to. If there was a drone going in there to making sure things were not crazy and things like that, then that can give them the right situational awareness
Hmm.
that they don't need to feel like they need to go in and take control and
Guns
guns
blazing
blazing and
kind
all
of
those
thing.
kinds of things. Yeah, it just calms everything down. And I've actually talked to a police officer that I know about this, and he said the reason why they haven't done it as much is because they feel like the public doesn't like drones. And
Interesting.
it's just yeah, which I was like, really? We're decreasing the public safety because of just public sentiment towards
Well, I
drones
mean,
and
as we
public.
know
I
from
mean,
user
it's
experience, right? It's like you
yeah,
you run a study on that, and you might find out like it really freaks people out. So they'd say, okay, well, can
yeah,
we just do de-escalation techniques, as a way of kind of not putting drones in the middle of, um, some sort of residential area that's freaking them out. But like, I see where you're
yeah,
going. I mean, the fact is like little things are changing. Like the amount of sensors that they put on drones now for commercial use is pretty
sure,
amazing, right? They could detect the air, they could detect all that stuff. But in addition to that, they're making them very quiet. So
yeah,
what used to scare us before because it's like wah, 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 it's like now it's just whisper quiet. So
sure.
I do
Well,
think that might change.
I will acknowledge that there is the slippery slope of like ending up in a surveillance state,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where
yeah.
like everybody's being surveilled all the time.
Hmm.
And I think it's important to keep in mind that that is not what we should be moving towards. It should be more like, all right, we're aware of something's going on, but instead of sending out a human at high speed and into a dangerous situation, we're going to send this drone. And then if it's implemented in that way, then I think it increases the public safety without turning us into Big Brother in 1984.
Well, I hate to break it to everybody, but we're already in a surveillance state. I mean, and the reason why I say that is because if you look at Ring cameras and stuff, like almost every single house on this neighborhood has a Ring camera, and where's it pointing? Directly at the street. So it's like it's still we're still in a situation
Hmm.
where people are starting to get comfortable with having all these cameras and stuff, and we're basically asking like, can we use
Yeah.
drones as the next level of technology for these certain applications? Which,
Well, it's not
yeah,
even, I mean, it's not even camera dependent, right? It's not even sensor dependent. It's just like every single person's carrying a smartphone now. And
yeah, yeah.
there's a reason why, traffic predictions for Google are so good. It's because they're able to identify it's anonymized. So they're not looking at where Brian is or anything. They just know, all right, there's 150 Android phones traveling down this freeway at this speed, and now they just suddenly slowed down. So that's one of the reasons why that all exists. Like the the challenge at that point for them is just making sense of the data, which is not easy. Um,
The thing is like the, there have been plenty of times though where drones have really kind of like opened our eyes to things. And I'm going to give a
mhm.
great example of that because you were talking about that, and it kind of clicked in my head. Is that we didn't realize that sharks were around as much as they actually are on beaches,
Oh
and I
yeah.
mean close to surfers, close to swimmers, boogie boarders, right? And where that actually really began was drone use. So a lot of these schools, I think it was UC Santa Barbara and other places, were running studies through their labs where they would take drones out and they would run them across the coastline every single day for 6 months or a year during mating time or whatever it is, and finding that they're there all the time. And even our friends at GoPro, right? One of our friends, like he took his camera out and was able to spot a couple of them over in Capitola, right? So it's like we know that they're there because of the fact that this technology has really enabled us to get up high more frequently and kind of see what's going on. So there is some good aspects of them and good applications to be had with them. One of the applications that I always thought was really interesting was this one of agriculture because um, you and I had the opportunity to go and visit a vineyard and learn about their operations. And this was through a study that we were doing, and to see how much work logistically it takes to drive your car, your vehicle around and inspect your crops and all that kind of stuff on a daily basis is insane. Like there's a lot of
Hmm.
work, there's a lot that has to happen and a lot of driving and a lot of things. And to be able to take your drones and just send them out and have them analyzing and looking at things and sending you data back and that kind of stuff. That's super cool. And actually, I think I heard Martha Stewart was one of the first with her land where she grows a lot of crops and stuff. She was deploying drones like in like 2015, 16, like testing this stuff out. So like
Hmm.
I see a lot of positives for them. Um, I just I just don't see a lot of positives in recreation anymore. That's all.
No, yeah, it's just recreation, just being a normal user owning a drone. I think that's largely over unless you're just really into the technology and,
I
and
saw a
that's your
great
that's your hobby.
application that you would have loved, which was they basically took a drone, they outfitted it with a defibrillator,
Hmm.
and put it on there, and then they had someone kind of like fake a heart attack in the middle of an entirely crowded area. So imagine like like a concert or like somewhere where there's a huge festival and there's like hundreds of people. Well, how hard is it in order to get a vehicle through all those people to someone who's having a heart attack or needs support, right? So the drone flies over and it lands on the ground, and then it uses verbal
Hmm.
commands for whoever's around, says pick this up, put it on their chest, stand back, 3 2 1, and then uses the additional battery on the drone in order to shock and create a charge on it. And it was for kind of like a like search and rescue, I guess you'd call it. But um application, I thought, wow, that could save lives because of the amount of time you're saving by having something fly over
Yeah.
really quickly than trying to get a vehicle there.
Well, you can imagine that as kind of a first responder
Yeah.
kind of tool, getting somewhere, maybe delivering something like a defibrillator or Narcan, or just giving somebody instructions on what to do while somebody's coming, like another paramedic or something is en route.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of thing, or just getting situational awareness. So it's like, oh, you arrive and you're looking at this thing, you can see the paramedic will be able to get knowledge on like what kind of injury or situation they're getting into, so they can get things ready. That I think is a great application.
Yeah.
It can really that can save lives.
And the last one, which is that we'll talk about before we wrap up, is that there was this really, 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 really dreamy application that we were going to use drones to drop off packages at our houses. Like,
Yes.
and this was a 2000, I can remember this actually. This was 2014, 15. The conversation began because we were working with some people that were talking about it and they were building stuff for that. And I think it's a great idea still. I mean, it's so cool, like, to have
Mm-hmm.
something delivered if it needs to be. I think with electric vehicles, a lot of these delivery trucks are going electric now. So I think they're kind of pulling back a little bit on that. I think it's that last mile type of stuff. Instead of going up the hill, you could put your packages in the drone flies up, drops them off, comes back to the car and then, or the truck and then drives away. Um, why do you think we never really got to the point where people were delivering burritos to your house like they promised us?
Well, a few things. Uh, I think there's a bit of a hardware limitation there
Uh-huh.
to be able to carry. You got to get the right design. You have to have the right capabilities as far as lift and weight capacity. You can't have like a 5 pound or 5 ounce bird carrying a 1 pound coconut,
Yep.
right? So there are elements to that. Then you got to manage like the software elements of like automated delivery. There's a lot going on. I I I think it's going to happen still. I think it's
Really?
still in the works. I think that there are still some hardware and software design elements. I think the technology is there,
Mhm.
but I think getting it all together into a package where it can deliver, they've got to decide what size items they're going to deliver. There's a big difference between delivering a toothbrush and a bowling ball, right? Uh, so I think that there are so much, there's such a strong economic pressure in order to get there.
Mhm.
And I think that the benefits of it, as far as getting delivery vehicles off the road, making roads safer, getting items to where they need to be faster, opening up delivery capabilities
Mhm.
to places that are rural, or to people who can't who aren't as mobile. Those are all things that have such amazing value that I can't see it not happening.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen within the context of like there's a subset of companies that are able going to be able to do it. It's going to be Amazon and DoorDash and maybe a couple other companies, but Instacart.
Yeah.
But this is how Amazon eventually gets from 1 and 2 day delivery to same day delivery to 1 hour delivery of certain items.
That's true, yeah. Suddenly there'll be the hundreds of drones flying through the sky, dropping off packages at people's houses, and the
Well,
world will
I think that's
change.
one of the things that people don't want
Yeah.
is hundreds of drones.
Yeah.
But you can also set it up in such a way that it flies in certain areas at certain altitudes with these quieter rotors that they're not super visible, that people don't
Mhm.
notice them as much. So if you have them, for example, following like power lines and stuff, or obscuring themselves among around trees, or flying at the right altitude, you'd be surprised at how not visible they could be,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
non
yeah. I
intrusive
mean,
they
is
could
that
be.
is that your kind of your prediction? Is that where you think these things are gonna go? You think eventually we're just gonna
Yeah,
get to the point where it's like it's controlled, there's maybe lanes in the sky, and these quiet drones will come, drop stuff off, fly off, and that's just kind of how our airways are gonna look?
I think it will. I think it's one of the things that's constraining it actually uh, is regulation, and I think that with the financial pressure that will eventually happen.
Mhm.
Then the other thing constraining it is the obvious implementation is for delivery to rural locations.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people in rural locations tend to be more late adopters than early adopters. So that you have that kind of interplay. No, it wouldn't be surprising to me at all uh, to have an early test case. But of course, this is just a combination of late adopters for getting this. But can you imagine if mail in rural areas, maybe people who are separated by more than like 3 miles, right?
Yeah.
Are all delivered by drones. So
Great.
all of your physical paper mail, anything smaller than like let's say a 1 pound package, is delivered to you by drone,
Mhm.
so that you don't have to send trucks out there that need to follow the roads, and they're people are aware of it. Maybe they opt in so that they can receive it that way. They're tracked, so if the drone gets down for any reason, then they know where it is, and the post office can dispatch somebody to get it. But like, I think that this provides so much value on so many different levels that it will happen. I can't see how it won't.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you. Like my prediction is the same. Like I think that that's going to occur. I think the kind of the residential fun toy use, I think, is going to always be a very tiny market. Um, comparatively to other areas. But I also think we're going to see a lot of new software technologies applied to a lot of these drones, where the built-in technology just quickly enables what you need it to do. So you could just go buy a search and rescue drone as long as you have a permit. You could just go grab an agricultural drone. Everything is built into it. The things that you need, you just simply enable the technology that you need for your application, and suddenly the data is there and provided to you. Um, and I think that the battery technology, because it's getting better, is going to enable these drones to stay in the sky a lot longer and quieter, and then also just continue to charge themselves. Like I think the idea with a lot of these technologies is getting to the point, like with the Roomba, where you're not managing it. You don't have to go get
Mm-hmm.
it because it got stuck. You don't have to go get it and plug it in, right? It unsticks itself. It charges itself. It manages itself. It tells you when it needs to be maintenance, or taken care of. And I think that's where we're going to get with these as well. And it's kind of exciting. At the same time, it just feels adjunct to everything else that's being done right now. Meaning like AI, vision technology, all that stuff seems to be like what's in everybody's face and what we're working on all the time. And they're just going to benefit by grabbing all this stuff and applying it to their application. That's why we don't hear a
Yeah.
lot of it in tech. You don't hear a lot of news around drones. That's why we wanted to talk about it today, right? It's because it just
Well,
feels
yeah.
quiet.
I think everything we're talking about is enabled by AI.
Yeah.
Like it all becomes possible because of AI. Because if you can have an AI assistant that is tracking, a package that's going from place to place, that's flying this machine, like you can't really have a human flying every single drone
Hmm.
that's delivering packages back and forth.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to have like a surveillance drone or something like that at a physical facility, then it needs to be AI enabled because like the human being can't really do that.
Yeah.
Like it can't maintain that level of surveillance for a long period of time.
Yeah.
These are all things that, like, for object recognition, for location recognition, those are all for navigation. Those are all things that AI needs to be enabled in order to get it done.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. Well, I think this was fun. I'm glad we did this. It's, like I said, a quiet topic that hasn't been discussed. And I thought it was interesting to bring it up because people might find it interesting to listen to something that they don't hear about every day in the news. So thanks everyone so much for listening to us today. Really appreciate it. We post all of our updates as well as video versions of the podcast on the YouTube channel at the X Podcast. So please go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. If you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review on whatever platform you use. Thank you all, and we will see you all next week.